Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave from Evil Eye Games. Today we're going to continue on with our tutorial on creating our third-person cover shooter. And before we get started, I want to thank SCH5 over at the Unreal Engine forums. He ended up messaging me, and the one thing he brought up was our animation blueprint, and he came up with a way to simplify it. And as soon as I read what he was doing, it instantly popped in my head. I'm like, holy crap, how did I not think of this? What we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead, we're going to simplify our animation blueprint. So for this, we're going to go into our characters folder, into our player character, and we're going to open up our player anim blueprint. And so right now, looking at our AnimBP overall, we have a whole lot of nodes going on, and I mentioned that I really didn't have all that great of a way to simplify this so that it was easier to read. But SCH5 came up with this idea, so we're going to go ahead and implement this so we can collapse down this graph to a much simpler graph. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of our top functions here, or our top animation states, and I'm going to drag these out, and I'm going to break the links here. I'm going to delete all of these transitions traveling back to our rifle walk. And I'm just going to keep this around for reference so that if I forget anything or I have to go back and check anything, we can take a look at this. So the one thing I am definitely going to keep here is our take cover animation. So I'm going to break our transition here, and I'm going to grab and I'm going to drag our take cover down. And the one idea he came up with is having a variable that ends up saving the state of whether we're looking left or looking right. Now, the way he originally set it up, or the way he described it to me, is he used an integer, and he set that integer value to either a 0 or a 1. Essentially, that's the same thing as using a Boolean. A Boolean has one of two states. And since we're only going to be using two states for this, I'm going to go ahead and down in my blueprint here, I'm going to add a new variable. And we're going to call this variable is facing right. So what this variable is going to do is when we are taking cover, it is going to determine if we're facing to the right or not. So if it's true, we're facing right. If it's false, we're going to be facing to the left. And I'm going to go ahead and from here, we're going to drag out and we're going to connect our rifle walk and our sprinting over to our take cover. And we're going to go ahead and put in the transition rule. So we were checking if we were taking cover in order to take cover originally. So I'll just hook up is taking cover to our result. And we'll back out, and we'll do the same thing for our from sprinting to take cover. So we'll drag out is taking cover, and we'll go ahead and connect that up to our result. And now we're going to modify the take cover entrance here. So I'm going to double click on this, and right now we're just playing the cover low, idle to cover right. So what I'm going to do here is in our asset browser, I'm going to search for cover low, idle to, and I'm going to find the left animation. And I'm going to right click. I'm going to search for blend by bool. And there's this node right here that says blend poses by bool. And what this is going to do is it takes in a Boolean. And if the Boolean is true, it's going to play one animation. If it's false, it's going to use the other animation. So I'm going to go ahead and get our is facing right. And we're going to plug that into our active value. And then we're going to connect our idle to cover right into our true pose. And we're going to connect the idle to cover left into the false pose. And we're going to plug that into our final animation pose. And we'll go ahead and back out. And then we're going to go ahead and compile and save it. And over here in our preview, if we end up set is taking cover, our guy will make his transition up to the take cover. And we're going to go ahead and compile it to reset it again. And if we set is facing right to true and use is taking cover, he'll play the opposite animation. All right, and what we're going to do next is we're going to have our cover idle state. So I'm going to drag up from here and I'm going to create a new state. And I'm going to call this cover idle. And for our transition rule to cover idle, I'm going to double click on that. And we're going to have to make sure that the animation before it completes playing, but there's an option of 2 different animations. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to search for ratio. And we're going to see in here there's a time remaining for both the idle to cover left and the idle to cover right. So I'm going to select the idle to cover left first. And then we're going to search for ratio and get the ratio of time remaining for the idle to cover right. So we want one of each for the last transition series. And we want to check to see if it's less than. And we're going to give it a value of 0.4. And I'm going to copy this and paste it in. And we'll connect our idle to cover right. And then we're going to put in an OR operator. And we'll connect both of these up and plug that into our final result. So if either one of these hits less than 0.4, we're going to go ahead and enter our transition. And with the take cover animation, a real quick note is these animations I set to play at a rate of 1.5. So we're going to have to make sure that those values are correct in the settings for each of those animations. We can test it out in our preview panel over here, so we can compile. And if I hit is taking cover, our guy goes into the cover idle state. We haven't put an animation in there yet. So let's go ahead into our cover idle. In our asset browser here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for cover low, and we're going to look for the cover right animation and then also the cover left animation. So there's the cover low underscore cover R and the cover low underscore cover L. And once again, we're going to right click on the graph and we're going to search for blend by bool. So we'll select blend poses by bool. We'll connect the output to our final animation pose. We're going to grab our is facing right. And we're going to plug that into the active value. So if we are facing right, cover right is going to be the true pose. And cover L is going to be the false pose. And we'll go ahead and compile and save. And once again, we can go ahead and we can select our is taking cover. And here he gets into his left position. And if we check the is facing right, he will flip around. So we're going to go back to our graph here. So now that we have a character taking cover and going into his idle position, we have to figure out a way for him to flip back and forth. Now, in order to do this and make it a little bit easier, I'm going to vary this up just a little bit from what was suggested to me. And I'm going to create a state, and we're going to call this cover left to cover right. And then I'm going to add in another state, and we're going to call this cover right to cover left, which I don't remember if that's the same thing we had over here. Yes, we basically named it the same thing. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because We can go ahead and use the blend, but what's going to end up happening is in the middle of these animations, whenever we set our is facing right variable, it will shift the blend of what animation it's playing. And that'll take a lot of work to figure out where exactly we want to put our notify to change our is facing right variable. So just to make it as simple as possible here and without tweaking with a whole ton of numbers, I'm going to create a separate animation for each one of these. And we're going to create a transition to and from each one from cover idle. So in the case of our cover left to cover right, we're going to open this up and we're going to go into our asset browser and we're going to search for our cover L to cover R. We have our cover low, cover L to cover R. We're going to grab this animation. I'm going to drag it and plug it in. And I ended up changing the play rate of this animation. So I'm going to do that right now. It's going to be 1.667. And then for our other animation, the cover right to cover left, we're going to search for our cover R to cover L. We'll take the cover low, cover right to cover left. And we'll plug that in. And the animation speed on this is going to be 1.667 as well. So I'll set the play rate here to 1.667. And we'll back out. And now we have to get the transition rules. Now the two transition rules are going to be really easy. It's just going to be the time remaining ratio. So I'll search for time remaining ratio. We'll check to see if it is less than 0.4. And we'll plug that into our result. And then we'll do the same thing from cover right to cover left back to cover idle. And now for the transitions to each one of them, we're going to do the cover left to cover right first. So this will be the event that we're facing to the left. So we're going to get our is facing right. And this is going to fire when this is false. And we're going to want to fire it also when we want to move to the right. So we'll get our move right variable. And we're going to want to check to see that this is greater than 0. And we'll put it in an AND operator. And we'll plug that into our result. And that'll be that. And then to our cover right to cover left transition here. Once again, we're going to want to check our facing right variable. And we're already facing right, so this is going to occur when this is true. And we also want to fire it when our move right is less than 0. So go ahead and put in an AND operator. And we'll plug that in. And we'll compile and save. And lastly, we need to put in an animation notify in these animations. So I'm going to open up each one of these cover left to cover right animations. And in the notify screen here, we're going to add a notify, and we're going to add a new notify. And I'm going to call this flip facing. I'm going to save the animation. We'll go back to our graph, and I'll go back into our cover right to cover left animation. And we're going to add in that notify flip facing to this one as well. So I'll go ahead and save that. So both of these animations here are now firing a notify. So let's go ahead and implement that notify. So I'm going to go over to our event graph, and then down below here in an empty space, I'm going to right click, and we're going to search for that flip facing notify. And really all we want this to do is we're going to get our is facing right. and we're going to set is facing right, and we just want to flip the value. So from our get, I'm going to get a not operator, and we're going to plug this into our is facing right, and we'll go ahead and compile and save. And if we hit play to test it out, we'll get our character, we enter cover, and if I hit the button to the right, he flips around, and the animation is a little bit jarring here. Alright, so to fix the issue with the animation being jarring, I'm going to open up each one of these animations for our flipping left to right or right to left. And I'm going to grab our flip facing animation notify. I'm going to drag it out a little bit into the animation. We'll save that. And we'll do the same thing for our cover right to cover left animation as well. So you just want to drag it out somewhere into the animation. The reason we're getting the jarring effect was the blend occurred and it was firing that flip before it fully blended out of the cover idle animation. So if we go ahead and hit play, we go ahead and take cover and we can flip back and forth. And then next we're going to have to take care of our walking left and right. So in this graph over here, we went from our cover position to our walk. So I'm going to drag off of our cover idle here, and we're going to add a state machine, and I'm going to call this cover walk. And we're going to want to transition back as well. So inside of our cover walk animation, we're going to have to find our walk left and walk right animations. So I'm going to search for our cover L walk, and we're going to pull out our cover low walk left and our cover low walk right. And then once again, we're going to grab our is facing right, and we're going to right click and search for the blend by bool. We'll connect our is facing right to the active value. And then if it's true, we're going to want to walk right. And if it's false, we're going to want to walk left. So we can go ahead and back out of that. And then for the transition rules, we're going to use similar transition rules to what we used for our walk left and our walk right here. So for our transition into our cover walk right, originally we used this. I'm going to copy this for sake of ease, and we'll move into our transition to cover walk, and I'm going to paste this in place. So for walking right, we wanted to see is end of cover right not true, is move right greater than 0.5, and we want to add in a third AND pin. So I'm going to click on Add Pin in the AND, and we want to check to see if we're facing right. Now we also want to handle what happens if we're moving the other way. So real fast, I'm going to back out, and I'm going to grab the rule for our cover left to cover walk left here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And we'll move back into our transition from our idle into our walk. I'm going to go ahead and place that in place. And then for this one as well, we're going to want to add another pin. And in this case, since we're moving left, we want to get is facing. And we want to check to see if it's false, so we're going to add in a not Boolean. And we're going to go ahead and plug that into our AND. And from our ANDs, we're going to put in an OR. And we're going to plug that into our can enter transition. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save this. And then we have to handle the transition rule back. And these transition rule back is going to be an amalgamation of what we were doing before. So for our return value from cover right here, we want to check this. I'm going to copy our transition from cover walk right to cover right. And I'm going to simply paste that into place. And then we want to do the same thing for our cover left over here. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to paste that into place in the return as well. And then we're going to have to check the facing direction as well. So for this, we are going to pull out our is facing right, and we're going to get it twice. Now for the end of movement right here, we want to check to see is there end of movement right, or is our move right less than 0.5. And we're going to drag off the or here, and we're going to put in an and operator. And we're going to connect that into our complete statement here. And then we're going to do the same thing over here with this or statement. We're going to add an and to the end of it. And we're going to plug that in. And I'll just drag it over. And then finally, we're going to connect up an or. So we're going to end up with this resulting statement that we're going to check to see is end of cover right true, or is move right less than or equal to 0.5. And if that's true, is facing right also true? Or we're going to check to see if the end of cover of left is true. We're going to check to see if move right is greater than equal to negative 0.5. And if that's true, we're going to check to see is facing right true. Although this should be a not. So I'm going to drag this back, and we're going to put in a not operator in here. And we're going to plug that into our final and. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save, and let's give this a test. So I'm going to go ahead and move into cover. I can flip over to the right and walk right. He stops at the end of the cover automatically. And if I hit the left key, he's going to walk to the left and then stop at the left end of cover. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go back to our graph here. And we have our in cover movement here handled pretty well. And the next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get out of cover. So I'm going to right click, and we're going to create a new state. And I'm going to call this cover to idle. I'm going to drag this off to the side a little bit here. And we're going to have to make a transition from our cover walk to our cover to idle, from our cover idle to our cover to idle, and then finally a transition from our cover to idle down to our rifle walk. And we'll just position it like this. And then for our cover to idle here, I'm going to open this up first. And we're going to need to grab the animations for our cover to idle. So there's going to be the cover L to idle. So we're going to select the cover low, cover L to idle. And then we also want the cover R to idle. So I'll go ahead and search for that. And we'll select the cover low, cover right to idle. And then once again, we're going to go ahead and grab our is facing right boolean. And I'll right click in the graph, and we'll search for our blend by bool. And I'll connect our is facing right to our active value. If we're facing right, we want the cover right to idle to be true. And if it's false, we want the cover left to idle to be true. And we'll go ahead and plug that into our final animation pose here. So I'm going to go ahead, and that should finish this up. Both these animations have the notifies built into them. So we're going to step back and we're going to go back to our anim graph. And now we have to take care of the transition rules. And we're going to use the same kind of transition rules that we used to transition out of our cover walk right and our cover walk left. So here I have move forward is less than or equal to negative 0.75, or is taking cover is set to false. So real fast, I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to paste this in to our cover walk to idle. And then from our cover idle to cover to idle, I'm pretty sure we just used a is not taking cover. Although I'm going to paste in the same transition rule with the movement, because yeah, we want to be able to back out of the cover with the movement key. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that same transition rule in. And let's go ahead and compile and save. And I missed one transition from cover to idle to rifle walk. So we're going to open up that transition. We're going to search for a ratio. And we're going to get our time remaining for each one of the animations. So we're going to get a ratio for cover left to idle and also cover right to idle. Once again, we're going to check to see if it's less than 0.4. And then we're going to put in a OR operator. And we'll go ahead and connect these up. And plug it into our result. So if we go ahead and compile and save right now, we're not getting any compiler errors. So let's go ahead and test it out. So if I hit play, I'm going to move into cover. I'm going to hit the back key, and we're going to get out of cover. I'm going to get in cover, and I'm going to use the is taking cover button. So we get out of cover using the command. And then we're going to have to test it from the right-hand side as well. And then from our walking animations as well. All right, so it seems to be functioning as it should. So at this point, we have to handle our aiming from cover. So we're going to have either the cover right to aim right or the cover left to aim left that we used before. So in order to do this, I'm going to rearrange this just a little bit. And from our cover idle and our cover walk, we're going to have to move into an aiming transition. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a new state. And I'm going to call this cover to aim. And we're going to need a transition from cover idle into our cover to aim and our cover walk into cover to aim. I'm just going to move that up there real fast. Inside our cover to aim here, we're going to want to get our is facing right boolean. We're going to want to get our blend by bool. And we're going to hook that in. And then for these animations, we're going to use the cover L to aim, I believe it is. Here we go. It's the cover low to aim U. So we're going to want the cover left to aim U. And we're also going to want the cover R to aim U as well. So once again, if facing right is true, we want to use the cover right to aim up. And if it's false, we're going to use the cover L to aim U. And we're going to go ahead and plug that into our final animation pose. And we're going to need a transition rule between these two. And our previous transition rule was just to check to see if we're aiming. So we're going to go ahead and open up each one of these transition rules. And we're going to just grab our is aiming variable and plug it straight in. And then we're going to have to move into our aim up position, which, if I remember correctly, is the cover low underscore aim U animation. And so we're going to create a new state. I'm going to call this cover aim. And I'm going to drag this out a little bit more to get this further out of the way. And we're going to make a transition from our cover to aim over to our cover aim. And the transition rule for this is simply going to be a ratio. And we're going to get the time remaining for either or for both of the animations. And once again, we're going to want to check to see if it is less than 0.4. And then we go ahead and plug these into a OR operator. And we can back to our anim graph. And then we're going to have to put in a aim animation here. So in our asset browser, I'm going to search for the aim U. And we're going to search for the cover low aim U animation. And then we also had the aim offset here. So we'll grab our aim offset and we'll plug that in. And we'll also bring in the variables for our aim yaw and our aim pitch. And we'll plug those in as well. And then we're going to have to create a return to cover. So from our cover aim, I'm going to drag off and we're going to add a new state. And we're going to call this aim to cover. And the transition rule down here, we're just going to get is aiming. We're going to add a not operator because we don't want to be aiming when we want to go back. And we'll plug that into our results. And then in our aim to cover animation here, we're going to have to get the return animations that we're using. So there's going to be a aim U2, and we're going to get the aim to cover left and the aim U to cover right animations. And then once again, we're going to get our is facing right. And then we're going to go ahead and blend by bool. And we'll connect that to our output. We'll connect is facing right to our active value. We'll connect the cover right to the true and the cover L to the false. And then we're going to have to go ahead and drag a transition back to our cover idle. And we're going to have to create a transition rule for this. So once again, we're going to right click and we're going to search for ratio. And we're going to have to get the time remaining for both the left and the right animation. And we're going to once again check to see that is less than 0.4. And we'll add in a OR operator. And we'll plug that into our result. And we'll go ahead and compile and save. And let's go ahead and hit play. So if we go ahead and right click, we're going to pop up and we're going to aim. And if we let go, we're going to go ahead and get back into cover. And one thing I noticed too when I was playing around with this earlier is if you're aiming off to the side and you hit the aim button, our character pops up and he aims forward first and then snaps to the direction that we're looking. So in order to fix that, in the cover to aim animation here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this off to the left a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and get the rifle aim offset, and we're going to go ahead and plug this in, and then we'll have to add in the player aim yaw and the player aim pitch as well. So we'll go ahead and back out of that, and if we compile and save and we hit play, we'll go ahead and take cover, and if we look over to the left and go up to aim, he kind of makes a really nice transition, at least nicer than it looked before, where he's looking when he pops out of cover. And then lastly here, we were ending up getting out of our aim position here and going to the idle as well. So we're going to need to get a copy of our dummy animation that's in here, which is our cover aim to idle. And I'm going to right click in the graph here, add a new state, and we're going to call this cover aim to idle. And we're going to make this from our cover aim to our cover aim to idle. And then this cover aim idle is going to have a transition going back down to our rifle walk. And I'm going to drag this out a little bit more just to even the spacing out. So from our transition from cover aim to idle here, we're going to use the same rule that we were using before. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And then we're just going to place it in place for the transition rule here. So we're simply checking is move forward less than or equal to -0.75 or is not taking cover set. And then for our cover aim to idle, we're going to have to add an animation in here, which is our dummy animation that we were using before, which I believe was cover aim to idle. So we're going to drag that animation out, and we're going to connect that in place. And then finally, for the transition rule back down to rifle walk here, we're going to get the ratio time remaining. And once again, we're going to check to see if it's less than 0.4. And we'll plug that into our result. So we'll go ahead and compile and save. And then we're going to need a way to walk back and forth while we're aiming from cover. So I'm going to go ahead and from our cover aim here, I'm going to drag off, I'm going to create a new state, and we're going to call this cover aim walk left. And we'll also drag off from our cover aim and we'll create a new state. We'll call it cover aim walk right. And then we're going to create transitions back. And I'm going to correct my spelling. And then we're going to create a transition from each one to the cover aim to idle. And I'll just rearrange these a little bit here. And then we're going to have to set up all the transition rules. So the transition rules are going to be the exact same as what we had from before. So simply for the aim right to aim right, move left, I'm going to copy this transition. And I'm going to paste this into our cover aim to our cover aim walk left. And then the transition back will be the same. So once again, I am going to go ahead and copy it. And we'll paste it into place. And then we're going to do the same thing with our move right. So we'll copy the transition to move right. And we'll paste that in for our transition to our aim walk right. And then we'll copy the return transition as well. And then finally, our transition out into our idle is going to be the same as our cover aim to idle. So I'm going to once again copy this, and I'm going to paste this into the two other transitions from our walk left and our walk right. So if we go ahead and compile and save, we'll go ahead and hit play, and we'll give it a test. So I can go ahead and move up into the aim position, and if I walk left and walk right, I didn't put animations in place. So we're going to have to stick those animations in there. So I'm going to go up to our move left here, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy everything. And I'm going to paste it into our walk left. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to our move right from before. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it into our walk right. And let's go ahead and compile and save. And we'll hit play. And we'll try it once again. So if I go ahead and hit aim, I can walk left. And I can walk right. And when we aim and unaim, because of the is facing right, it's going to remember which direction we were pointed in. And as well, if we exit cover and go to re-enter cover, it's going to remember the last position we were in as well. So I exited cover there facing to the right. So if I go to enter cover again, it's going to face me to the right as well again. So at this point, we have a fully working tree that is a lot less complex than we had before. So I'm going to get rid of all of this up here because we really don't need any of this any longer. There we go. And we can compile and save all that. And I'm going to go ahead and close out of our player AnimBP. And one last thing that I wanted to do, I noticed I ended up forgetting. I'm going to go into our weapons, into our player weapons, and into our base weapon. And in our fire weapon event here, I noticed that when I set up the play animation, I didn't set the animation to play to a variable. And the weird thing about this is if you right click and try to promote it to a variable, it won't do it. So we're going to add in a new variable, and I'm going to call this weapon firing animation. And then for the variable type here, we're going to search for anim sequence. So we'll select an anim sequence reference. And if we compile it, we can go ahead and set the default value. And it was a rifle, I believe a fire rifle W. There we go. And select the fire rifle W. Set it as the default. And then we can drag this weapon firing animation out here. We can get it, and we can plug it into our anim to play. So that way, when we configure other weapons in the future, we can change up the firing animation, because different meshes are going to have different firing animations. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save this. So that's going to go ahead and complete today's video. Once again, I want to thank SCH5 from the Unreal forums for his suggestion. Really pointed me in the right direction on that one, and gave me a new idea, which is always good, so thank you very much. And of course, to everyone else, thanks for watching.